The girl appeared with a fence line dissolved into weeds and shadow, barefoot and unafraid, like she had stepped out of land itself. Jonah Reed had been fixing wire since sunrise, the kind of work that kept a man's mind busy, so his thoughts wouldn't wander places they shouldn't. His ranch lay far from town, pressed up against a stretch of woods locals avoided. Too rocky, too quiet, too easy to disappear in. Jonah liked it that way. He was hammering in a staple when the feeling hit him, that unmistakable prickle between the shoulders. Being watched, Jonah straightened slowly and scanned the trees. Wind moved the grass. A crow lifted from a branch. Nothing else. Then he saw her. She stood just beyond the fence, no more than 6 years old, wearing a faded dress patched so many times it barely remembered its original color. Her dark hair fell loose around her face, and her feet were bare despite the cool morning air. Jonah's heart thudded hard. No children lived anywhere near his land. The nearest neighbor was miles away, and town was farther still. "Morning," the girl said. Her voice was calm. Curious, not scared at all. Jonah swallowed. "Where'd you come from?" She tilted her head, studying him like she was deciding something important. "From the trees." That answer did nothing to help. "Where are your parents?" he asked, keeping his voice gentle. She smiled then, soft and certain. "My mommy's waiting. She said you'd come." Jonah frowned. "Waiting where?" The girl took a step closer to the fence. Her eyes were too knowing for someone so small. "Do you want to meet her?" The question landed heavy in Jonah's chest. There was no one living on his land. He knew every acre. He'd walked it, bled on it, buried his past in it. For 5 years, it had been empty except for him and the animals. "I don't think that's a good idea," he said slowly. The girl shrugged like grown-ups often missed obvious things. "She makes coffee and bread. You look like someone who forgot how to eat with other people." Jonah stared. "What's your name?" he asked. "May," she said. "What's yours?" "Jonah." She nodded, satisfied. "Okay, Jonah, come on." She turned before he could stop her and slipped through a gap in the brush like she knew it by heart. Every sensible instinct he had screamed at him to stay put. Children didn't appear out of nowhere. Men didn't follow strangers into the woods and come back unchanged. But Jonah watched her small back disappear between the trees, and something older than sense pulled at him. "Hey, wait," he called. She didn't stop, just glanced back, smiling, sure he'd follow. And he did. The woods swallowed them quickly. The air cooled. The ground dipped and twisted, and Jonah realized they were following a narrow trail, used often, though by whom he didn't know. "Not far," May called. "Mommy hates it when I wander, but she said today was different." Jonah's hand hovered near the knife on his belt. They crossed a shallow creek, barely more than stones and trickling water, and then the trees opened. Jonah stopped dead. A cabin sat tucked into the hollow, like it belonged there. Weathered logs, a stone chimney, smoke rising thin and steady into the morning sky. A small garden off to one side, neat and alive. Someone lived here, on his land. Before he could speak, the cabin door opened. A woman stepped out. She was tall and worn the way hard years carve into people, dark hair braided down her back. Sleeves rolled to strong forearms dusted with flour. Her eyes locked onto Jonah instantly, sharp and wary. "May," she said, her voice low. "Come here." The girl ran to her, slipping easily into the woman's side. The woman didn't take her eyes off Jonah. "You shouldn't be here," she said. Jonah nodded slowly, stunned. "I didn't know anyone was." Her mouth tightened. "Now you do." May looked up at her mother, then back at Jonah. "I told him to meet you." The woman exhaled, long and tired. Jonah cleared his throat. "My name's Jonah Reed. I own this land." The woman's gaze didn't waver. "I know who you are." That, somehow, was the most unsettling thing of all. She rested a hand protectively on May's shoulder and said, "My name is Eliza." The woods were quiet around them. Smoke curled from the chimney. A child stood between two strangers. And Jonah Reed understood deep in his bones that whatever he had just walked into, his life was no longer as alone. Jonah Reed stood at the edge of the clearing, boots planted in damp soil, staring at a life that should not have been there. The cabin looked permanent. Not a squatter's shelter or a hunter's lean-to, but a home. The logs were weathered but solid, the roof carefully patched, smoke curling from the chimney like a quiet declaration. Someone belongs here. And somehow, that someone had lived unseen on his land. Eliza didn't invite him closer. She didn't tell him to leave either. She simply stood there, one arm curved around May's shoulders, her body angled subtly forward in the way of a mother prepared to shield. "How long have you been back here?" Jonah asked carefully. "Long enough," Eliza replied. "That's my property," he said, not accusing, just stating a fact. She nodded. "So the papers say." Jonah frowned. "You've been living here without permission." "Yes." The honesty threw him. No excuses. No pleading. May tugged at her mother's sleeve. "Mama, he's not mean." Eliza's jaw tightened slightly. "You don't know that." Jonah lifted both hands slowly. "I'm not here to cause trouble. I didn't even know this place existed." That was the point. Silence stretched between them. A breeze stirred the treetops. Somewhere, a bird took flight. "You live out here alone?" Jonah asked. Eliza hesitated. "With May." "Any help?" "Neighbors." "No." Jonah glanced at the small girl, her bare feet, the confidence with which she moved through the woods. She should be in school. May frowned. "Mama teaches me." Eliza spoke before Jonah could respond. She can read. She knows numbers. She knows how to survive. That's more than most people ever learn. Survive. The word landed heavier than it should have. Jonah rubbed the back of his neck. "You know people in town will notice eventually. Smoke. Trax gardens don't hide forever." Eliza's eyes darkened. "I know. Why hide it all?" That question changed the air. Eliza studied him like she was measuring risk, deciding whether the truth would cost more than the lie. "Because the last time I trusted people," she said quietly, "they tried to take my child." May stiffened. Jonah felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. "Take her," he repeated. "They said I was unfit," Eliza continued. "Said a woman alone couldn't raise a child right. Said grief made me dangerous." "What grief?" Eliza's gaze drifted briefly toward the trees. "My husband died." Jonah didn't press. Some losses announced themselves without details. "I'm sorry," he said. She nodded once. "So was I." May slipped away from her mother and knelt near the garden, pulling at a weed with practiced hands. Eliza watched her every movement, even while speaking. "You've been here how long?" Jonah asked. "Almost 3 years." 3 years. Jonah looked around again. The fence line he'd checked a dozen times. The land he thought he knew. "Why now?" he asked. "Why let her come find me?" Eliza's lips parted, then closed. She looked down at May, then back at him. "Because hiding teaches children the wrong lessons," she said. "And because winter's coming." Jonah understood that kind of math. Cold winters. Limited supplies. Hard choices. "I won't turn you in," he said suddenly. Eliza stiffened. "You don't know me." "I know what it looks like when someone's doing their best with nothing," he replied. "And I know what town gossip can do to people who don't fit." Her eyes searched his face, suspicious, wounded, hopeful against her will. "And what do you want in return?" she asked. "Nothing," Jonah said honestly. "Right now, I just want to understand." May popped up suddenly, dirt smudged and grinning. "Mama, can you stay for coffee? You made extra." Eliza closed her eyes briefly, like she was bracing herself. Jonah almost laughed. "I don't want to intrude." "You already did," Eliza said. Then, after a pause, "But coffee's already on." She stepped aside, opening the door wider. The cabin smelled like bread and with smoke, like warmth. Jonah crossed the threshold, and with that single step, unknowingly walked out a life he'd been surviving, and into something that would demand everything he had left. The cabin was smaller inside than Jonah expected, but warmer, not just from the fire crackling in the stone hearth, but from the way everything had a place and purpose. A narrow table, 2 chairs and a bench, shelves lined with jars of dried herbs and preserved vegetables, a sewing basket tucked beneath the window, a life carefully built, quietly defended. Jonah, remove his hat without thinking. "Sit," Eliza said, pouring coffee into mismatched cups. Her movements were efficient, practiced, nothing wasted. May climbed onto the bench beside Jonah, swinging her feet. "Mama makes the best bread," she announced. "Even better than before." "Before what?" Jonah asked. May opened her mouth. "May!" Eliza warned gently. The girl grinned. "Before we had to hide." Eliza shot Jonah an apologetic glance and set a cup in front of him. "She talks too much." "She talks like someone who hasn't been told to be afraid," Jonah replied. That earned him a sharp look. Not angry, evaluating. "You shouldn't be here," Eliza said again, quieter now. "If people find out you knew and didn't report us." "I don't answer people who ruin lives with whispers," Jonah said, "and I don't report mothers feeding their kids." May beamed. "See? Not mean." Eliza exhaled slowly and finally. "Saturday, you said you want to understand." "I do." She wrapped her hands around her cup, staring into the dark liquid like it might tell the story for her. "My husband died 4 years ago," she began. "Fell from a horse during a storm. Bad luck. That's all it was." Jonah nodded. "Accidents happened. But the town needed more than bad luck," she continued. "They needed blame. Someone to point at. Someone who wasn't from one of the old families." Her jaw tightened. "Me." Jonah's hands curled unconsciously. "They said I was cold. Said I didn't cry enough. Said grief made me strange. Said I wanted his land." May leaned against her mother's side, suddenly quiet. "They couldn't prove anything," Eliza went on. "So they did worse. They isolated us, threatened me, talked about taking May for her own good." Jonah swallowed hard. "So you ran." "I chose my child," Eliza corrected. "There's a difference." Silence filled the cabin, heavy but honest. "And May?" Jonah asked gently. "She's never known town life?" Eliza shook her head. "Just this. The woods." "Me?" May looked up. "I like it, but Mama gets sad sometimes." Eliza stiffened. "I do not." May shrugged. "You do at night." Jonah looked away, suddenly feeling like he was trespassing on something sacred. "You're good with her," he said after a moment. "She trusts you completely." Eliza's voice softened. "She's all I have." "And what happens when someone notices the smoke?" Jonah asked. "Or the tracks? Or the garden?" Eliza's lips pressed together. "We move." "Again? If we have to." Jonah leaned back, the chair creaking. "That's not a plan. That's survival." Eliza met his eyes. "Survival is all some people are allowed." May frowned. "But Jonah has a big house." Jonah nearly choked on his coffee. Eliza groaned. "May!" "It's empty," May continued matter-of-factly. "I saw it when I came to find him. Lots of rooms. No laughs." Jonah froze. "You went to my house?" "Just the outside," May said. "Mama says not to go where we're not invited." Eliza closed her eyes. "I'm so sorry." Jonah stared at the child who had wandered his land and read his loneliness like a book. "It is empty," he admitted. May smiled gently. "It doesn't have to be." Eliza stood abruptly. "That's enough." She turned to Jonah, fear flickering back into place. "You should go, before this becomes complicated." Jonah rose slowly. "It already is." At the door, he paused. "I won't tell anyone," he said again. "But winter's coming, and hiding only works until it doesn't." Eliza didn't respond. She just nodded once. As Jonah stepped back into the woods, he felt it, the shift, the moment when a quiet man's life split into before and after. Behind him, the cabin door closed. But for the first time in years, the silence didn't feel empty. Jonah tried to forget the cabin. He failed. Every chore after that morning carried a shadow. Mending fences, checking stock, hauling feed. His eyes kept drifting toward the tree line, half expecting to see a small barefoot girl waving like nothing the world had changed. But nothing did change, and everything had. 3 days passed before trouble arrived. It came in the form of Deputy Harris and a man from town Jonah barely knew, riding up his drive with the casual confidence of people who believed the land answered to them. Jonah straightened from the trough he was scrubbing, jaw tightening. "Morning," Harris called. "Heard you've been busy." Jonah wiped his hands on his jeans. "Busy doing my work." Harris dismounted, eyes sweeping the ranch. Funny thing about work, sometimes it uncovers things that shouldn't be there. Jonah's pulse slowed, that old, steady calm he'd learned after loss settled into his bones. "Where are you getting at?" he asked. "There's been talk," Harris said. "Smoke in the woods. Tracks. A child seen near your fence." Jonah said nothing. "That land's yours," Harris continued. "If someone's squatting, that makes it your responsibility." Jonah met his gaze. "Or my choice." The second man shifted uncomfortably. "People are worried. A woman alone with a child. You know how that looks." Jonah did. "Too well. You don't get to decide what worried looks like," Jonah said coldly. "And you don't get to decide who deserves a home." Harris narrowed his eyes. "You protecting someone?" Jonah didn't blink. "I'm protecting what's right." That answer was enough. Harris sighed. "We'll be back," he said, "with papers if we have to." When they rode off, Jonah didn't move for a long time. Then he saddled his horse. The woods felt different now, less like shelter, more like a trap. Eliza was splitting kindling when Jonah reached the clearing. She froze when she saw him, axe halfway raised. "You shouldn't be here," she said immediately. "They know," Jonah replied, her face drained of color. "How long?" "Days. Maybe less." May ran from the cabin, skidding to a stop when she saw Jonah's expression. "Mama?" Eliza lowered the axe slowly. "What did they say?" "That they're coming back," Jonah said, with authority. Silence fell heavy as snow. Eliza closed her eyes. When she opened them, the fear was gone, replaced by something harder. "Then we leave tonight," she said. "No," Jonah said firmly. She stared at him. "You don't get to decide that." "I do when running puts a child at risk," he replied. "Winter's coming. You're tired. May's growing. You can't keep disappearing." Eliza laughed once, sharp and bitter. "You think town will welcome us? You think they'll forget what they decided about me?" "No," Jonah said. "I think they'll try to take her." May clutched Eliza's hand. "Mama?" Eliza knelt instantly, pulling her close. "It's okay. Mama's here." Jonah crouched too, lowering himself to May's level. "How you feel about staying somewhere warm for a bit?" May looked between them. "With you? If your mama says yes." May considered this seriously. "Does it have bread?" Jonah almost smiled. "It can." Eliza stood slowly. "You're asking us to walk into judgment." "I'm offering you a roof they can't question," Jonah said. "And time to decide your next move without running." "And when they come?" she asked quietly. Jonah's voice didn't waver. "They come through me." Eliza searched his face, looking for pity or obligation. She found neither, only resolve. "I don't trust easily," she said. "I don't ask you to," Jonah replied. "Just trust me enough to protect a child who shouldn't have to hide." May tugged Eliza's sleeve. "Mama, I'm tired of hiding." Eliza's shoulders shook once. Then she straightened. "Pack what we can carry," she said softly. "We'll go at dusk." Jonah nodded. "I'll bring the wagon." As he turned back toward the trees, he knew this was a moment everything would be tested. Because once you step out of hiding, the world has no choice but to see you. They arrived at Jonah's house just as the last light slipped behind the hills. May climbed down from the wagon and stared up at the porch with wide eyes. "It's big," she whispered, like speaking louder might wake something. "It's old," Jonah said, "and drafty, but it's solid." Eliza didn't speak. She stood in the yard for a long moment, hands clenched in her coat sleeves, like a woman crossing an invisible line. Leaving the woods felt wrong in her bones. Too open, too exposed. Jonah waited. He didn't rush her. He'd learned the hard way that forcing people only drove them farther away. Finally, she nodded once. "All right." Inside, the house smelled of pine and dust and solitude. Jonah lit lamps while May wandered from room to room, touching walls, peeking into corners. "There's an echo," she announced. "That's because no one's laughed here in a while," Jonah said. May turned, solemn. "We can fix that." Eliza pressed a hand to her mouth, eyes shining despite herself. They settled into a rhythm quickly, not because it was easy, but because all three of them were used to adapting. Eliza cooked with what Jonah had. May fell asleep in a bed for the first time in years, sprawled sideways like she needed to take up space while she could. Jonah sat at the table long after the house went quiet. He didn't regret his choice, but he knew the cost was coming. It came the next morning. 3 riders this time. Deputy Harris, the man from town, and a woman Jonah recognized instantly, Mrs. Caldwell, church organizer, self-appointed moral compass. They didn't bother with greetings. "We hear you've taken in a woman and child," Caldwell said, lips thin. "A woman with history." Jonah stepped onto the porch, blocking the doorway behind him. "They're my guests." Harris snorted. "That's so?" "Because there's talk and neglect. Isolation. A child raised improperly." "That child reads better than most adults in this county," Jonah said evenly. "And she's fed, loved, and safe." Caldwell's eyes flicked past him, sharp. "Where is she?" "Inside," Jonah replied. "We're not invited." Eliza peered behind him then, spine straight, face calm in the way of someone who'd already survived worse than this. May peeked out from behind her skirt. Caldwell inhaled sharply. "There she is." May looked up at Jonah. "Is this the mean part?" Jonah didn't hesitate. "Yes." May nodded. "Okay." Eliza rested a hand on Jonah's arm. "I won't run," she said clearly. "Not anymore." Caldwell bristled. "You don't get to decide that." "I do," Eliza replied. "As her mother." Harris shifted. "There are procedures." "There's law." Jonah cut in. "And there's harassment. Choose carefully which side you want to stand on." For the first time, uncertainty crossed Harris's face. "You want to push this," Jonah continued. "You'll do it with a judge listening. Not rumors. Not whispers. Evidence." Silence followed. Caldwell sniffed. "This isn't over." "No," Jonah said. "It's just no longer quiet." They left with their threats intact, but weakened. Inside, Eliza's knees buckled. Jonah caught her before she fell. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I brought this to your door." "You brought life," Jonah said. "The trouble came on its own." That night, May crawled into Jonah's lap without asking. "If they try to take me," she said seriously, "will you stop them?" Jonah held her close, feeling the weight of the promise forming in his chest. "Yes," he said, "I will." Eliza watched them, fear and hope twisting together. For the first time since the woods, she let herself believe they might not have to face the world alone. But belief, Jonah knew, was only the beginning. The hearing was set for a Tuesday morning, gray and cold, the kind of day that pressed down on a person's chest before they ever spoke a word. Jonah rode into town with Eliza beside him and May between them, small hands tucked into both of theirs. The wagon wheels sounded too loud on the hard-packed road. Every building they passed seemed to watch. They did not hide. That was the first victory. The courthouse was already half full. Familiar faces. Curious ones. Judgment sharpened and waiting. Deputy Harris stood near the door, avoiding Jonah's eyes. Mrs. Caldwell sat stiff-backed in the front row, lips pursed like she was already disappointed in the verdict. The judge arrived, a woman with steel-gray hair and eyes that had seen too much foolishness to tolerate more. "This court is convened to determine the welfare of a minor child," she said. "Proceed." The accusations came first. Isolation, impropriety, a mother deemed unfit because she had survived differently than others approved of. Eliza listened without interruption. She didn't shake. She didn't cry. When it was her turn, she stood. "I did not hide because I was guilty," she said calmly. "I hid because I was afraid. Afraid that grief and gossip would be used as weapons against my child. Everything I did to keep her safe." The judge nodded once. "And is she safe?" Eliza looked down at May. "Yes." Jonah was called next. "I own the land," he said. "I found them living not in neglect, but in care." This child is educated, kind, and loved. If that's unfitness, then we need to rethink our definitions. The judge turned her gaze to May. Do you feel safe? May nodded solemnly. Yes, ma'am. Do you feel loved? May squeezed Jonah's hand. Very. Silence filled the room. Finally, the judge spoke. There is no evidence of harm, only discomfort from people who don't understand difference. This petition is dismissed. The gavel fell. Eliza closed her eyes. May grinned. Outside, the air felt lighter, like breathing after being underwater too long. They rode home without speaking much. Words felt unnecessary. At the ranch, May ran straight for the porch, laughing. Eliza stopped just short of the steps, overwhelmed. It's really over, she said. For now, Jonah replied. And when it isn't, we'll face it. She turned to him, eyes bright with unshed tears. Why did you do this? Jonah thought about the empty house, the quiet years, the moment a barefoot girl had asked if he was sad. Because you reminded me how to live, he said, and because some things are worth standing for. That night, the house sounded different. Laughter echoed. A fire burned warmer. May fell asleep between them on the rug, clutching Jonah's sleeve like it was permanent. Weeks passed, then months. Eliza began sewing again. May started lessons in town. People watched, but fewer whispered. Some even smiled. One evening, as the sun dipped low, May looked between them and asked, Do families always start in the woods? Jonah smiled. No. Eliza brushed her hair back gently. But sometimes the best ones do. May nodded, satisfied, and Jonah understood the truth of it. What he'd found in the woods wasn't a secret. It was a beginning, not a miracle, not a fairy tale, but something stronger, a family built from courage, choice, and a quiet decision to stand when running would have been easier. And that, Jonah knew, was more than enough.